Welcome back to training and coaching discussions. Our next topic is going to be on periodization. It's all about macro, meso, and micro cycles. Periodization is an act or instance of dividing a subject into historical eras for purposes of analysis and study. So that is the dictionary form of the definition. To elaborate a little bit more, periodization is the division of a training year, which is a macro cycle, into smaller or more manageable intervals, mesocycles, with the goal of managing and coordinating all aspects of training to bring an athlete to peak performance at the most important competition or managing performance across a long in-season. So periodization is broken up into different cycles. Macro cycles are the bird's eye view of a training plan, usually broken up into 6 to 12 month periods. This is where you create smart goals and visions for the cycle. Can be applied not only in training for physical training for running or swimming or cycling, yoga training, weight training. It can also be applied to other aspects of life. So when you talk about a student's semester in college, the bird's eye view is the syllabus. That is the 4 to 5 month training period that someone may have. And then it's broken up into smaller units as well as chapters and tasks like assignments after that. Then you have mesocycles. Macrocycles are broken up into mesocycles. Mesocycles are usually 2 to 4 weeks in length and have a definitive sub-goal attached to them. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So when you're talking about increasing volume, increasing intensity, going back to the semester description, this would be your talking about American history, and we're on the American Revolution unit. And then we have microcycles. Microcycles are very specific tasks that might be weeks, a week, or a specific workout within a cycle. So this might be saying, okay, we're going to do this many reps of this many exercise. That's a microcycle. Talking about semester, going back to the semester type of thing. This would be, I need to submit this assignment on this date, and it's just a worksheet about an article that you read. So that would be a microcycle. So you can see bird's eye view broken up into units, broken up into tasks. So you have your goals, your sub-goals, and your tasks all together. So we're going to focus today on mesocycles. The first mesocycle is something called the prep period. The prep period is somewhere between 0 and 3 weeks, and it depends on the ability level and how much an athlete has been training up until this point. So a D1 athlete or a professional athlete who's kind of been training throughout his or her transition cycle or off season might not need a prep period at all. They might be able to go straight into training, and they might be consistent enough to make that happen. On the other hand, an athlete who has not trained in quite a long time, maybe 2 or 3 months over the winter cycle or throughout the summer or whatever it may be, they may need 3 weeks of a prep period in order to properly get into training without really increasing the risk of injury. So prep period is that period of time where you get to the gym and you do a light workout. You think, okay, well, I'm not as fit as I usually am. Let me do a lighter workout just to get into it. And you do that, and the next day you're sore and you're achy, and you're like, wow, I did a light workout and I'm still like this. And it's just that initial preparation that your body's going through to get back to consistency. So that is kind of the best description I can give for a prep period. The volume in a prep period should be low, and the intensity as well should be low. So if you're going by minutes, saying I'm going to train for 90 minutes, or if you're doing by sets, saying I'm going to do 30 sets per workout and do 3 workouts a week, or if you're going by mileage or yards, whatever it may be, the volume's low. Intensity, the same thing. So the speed or the weight of what you're doing is also low. It's just preparing the body to train adequately. The next phase is called the base cycle. The base cycle is all about increasing volume, and as you can see there, it increases volume. So the length of a base cycle is 3 weeks plus 1 recovery week. So it equals about 4 weeks per cycle. So base cycle, 3 weeks plus a recovery week. I'm going to talk about what a recovery week is. So this is all about prepping the body's skills for increased volume. So you might say, okay, this week I am running 10 miles. Next week, you're running 12 miles. The week after that, you're running 14 miles. All right. That is a base period where you're increasing volume. Generally speaking, you want to keep intensity lower. You don't want to increase both volume and intensity. Otherwise, you significantly increase the risk of injury. So generally speaking, you start with a base period, you increase volume slowly, just so your body can get prepped for an increased workload. Let's talk about the recovery week for a second. The recovery week is 1 week long. It's after a series of about 3 weeks for, let's say, the base cycle, and your volume and intensity is low. So you're basically going back to a prep cycle where you're really just preparing for the next mesocycle. So you do 3 weeks of base, doing let's say 1,000 yards of swimming this week, 1,500 yards of swimming next week, 2,000 yards of swimming the week after that. Your recovery week, you maybe drop down to 1,500 yards is kind of a slow, low intensity. That prepares you for whatever the next mesocycle may be, which may be another base cycle. So you might be doing a base 2, or you might be going into a build cycle. A build cycle is all about intensity. So instead of focusing on volume, we're focusing on intensity. And this is where you prep the body's skills for race intensity. And so intensity is all talking about weight or speed. All right, one and or the other. So when we talk about intensity, we're talking about I swim 2 minutes per 100. And the next week I swam a minute 50 per 100. The next week I swam a minute 45 per 100. Same thing for cycling, running, where you're saying I ran 6 minutes per mile. Next week I ran 5 minutes, 55 seconds per mile. The next week after that was 5 minutes and 50 seconds per mile. Or weight. So if we're talking about weight training, we're saying, okay, well, this week I did 100 pounds for the bench press. Next week I did 105 pounds. The week after that I did 110. So we're talking about weight and or speed for intensity. Volume generally keeps in a medium range. So once you build up enough base, and usually most people will go through 2 or 3 base cycles before you switch over to a build cycle. And so you'll drop down in volume a little bit, kind of where it was comfortable for you, lifestyle-wise as well as physically, and you keep the volume the same. So you might have started a base cycle at 10 miles per week. The first base cycle you ended at 14. The next base cycle you ended at 20. The third base cycle you ended at 25 miles a week. Maybe you go to about 20 miles a week. So you drop a little bit down, but it's a medium volume amount. But it's all about intensity for the build cycle. So you stay at 20 miles per week, but every week it gets a little faster. It gets a little heavier. So same thing with the build cycle. You're doing 3 weeks of increasing intensity, increasing that skill set that you're trying to work on. So the base cycle works on the skill set of volume. The build cycle works on the skill set of intensity. And then your 4th week is the recovery week. So the 4th week is that low volume, low intensity, just preparing you and prepping you for whatever the next mesocycle may be. And that might be another base or another build, or it may be the next mesocycle, which is peak. A peak cycle occurs for about 2 or 3 weeks. This is where you're becoming much more race specific. So if you're trying to train for a swimming race, a weight training competition, a running race, a triathlon, whatever it may be, this is where you're preparing and just prepping for that race specificity. All right, you're in the beginning, your training was more general, and then as you worked through the prep, base, build, and finally peak cycles, your training becomes much more specific to the exact skill set that you need. So, a peak cycle, about 2 or 3 weeks long, and it's all about increasing intensity while decreasing volume. So, this is something called tapering as well. So, a peak cycle and a taper cycle are the same thing, where a peak cycle and a taper cycle is all about resting. All right, so you're resting your body. So instead of doing 20 miles a week, you're doing 15 or even 10 miles a week, but you're increasing the intensity throughout that time. So you're spending less time in your feet, but more intensity and more speed and more weight, whatever it may be. And so that's what the peak cycle is all about. So you can prepare yourself for the best competition or the best training interval or the best time trial that you may have for what the goal that you're looking for is. So that is the peak cycle. After 2 or 3 weeks of a peak cycle, then you get into the goal cycle. Goal cycle is 1 week long. Volume is very unique. Intensity is very unique. The goal cycle or the race week is all about preparing and prepping you for the race. That's it. That is all you're going to be doing is prepping yourself for whatever race it may be. So, research shows that 7 to 10 days before a race, that is when your last quality workout should be. Any quality workout after 7 or 10 days before a race, and all you're doing is taking away from your strength. You're taking away from your performance. And so you don't want to do hard workouts. You don't want to do quality hard workouts 7 to 10 days before your race. All right? You've put in all the work. So if you've spent 16, 20, 24 weeks training for this moment, you're not going to get anything more in the last 7 to 10 days. The last 7 to 10 days are all about prepping your body. It's all about getting enough stimulation, but not too much stimulation, and trying to balance how you feel. So you want to feel sharp. That's really what the goal week's all about, making sure that your body feels sharp. Some people like to have kind of medium volume with low intensity. Some people like to have low volume with higher intensity. Some people like to have low volume and low intensity. It depends on how your body reacts, and that's why we like to race and compete many, many times, is so that we can learn how our body reacts to each and every situation. And so going through that experience, you finally get a feeling for what goes on. For myself, I actually like to have a goal week as about 2 weeks, where my peak cycle is about 3 to 4 weeks before race week, and then so I dropped down quite a bit in terms of volume, increased in intensity, and then the last 2 weeks before a race, I'll actually increase in volume slightly, decrease in intensity, which makes me sharp for goal week, and then I do just a very little for goal week. So that's kind of how I like to set my training plan up, and that's how my body reacts the best so I can feel sharp on race day. So that is what a goal week is all about. It's just keeping you sharp. Don't do anything stupid. Please don't. I mean, if you have a race, if you have a competition, doesn't matter what it is, a football game, ultimate frisbee, soccer game, tennis match, does not matter what it is. Do not do a quality hard workout the week of the event. All it's doing is taking away from your abilities, taking away from your speed, taking away from your strength, taking away from your fitness. Do not do it the week of a goal week. So that is what a goal week's about. keeping yourself sharp. So, you've had your goal week, your race or competition went well, didn't go well, you learned something from it. Now you go into something called transition. The transition period is all about just learning to love what you do. That's it. That is all transition is about. So transition period, we all experience transition in a different way. Some of us, myself as a triathlete, I like to continue to swim, bike, and run, and I might just do what feels good on that day. I might say, you know what, I want to swim today. I want to bike today. I want to run today. I don't really care. I just want to do what I love and not need to worry about anything in particular. I still will do those exercises and still will do those sports, but I will just do it ad hoc depending on what I feel for the day or what I feel for the week. Others, some, like I've heard of some swimmers, they get out of the water. They're done. They're like, you know what? I'm going to back off. I'm going to do some weight training. I'm going to play some frisbee. I'm going to do whatever. And they play something else. And that's okay. They want to take a step back to reevaluate why they do what they do and learn to love what they do again. Because training is not easy. Going through 20 to 24 weeks of very focused training is not easy to do. And so transition allows you to take a step back and say, all right, where am I at? And just like recovery week, transition is all about being able to clear your mind to make you feel prepared for the next macro cycle. So when we're talking about recovery weeks prepare you for the next mesocycle. Transition periods help you prepare for the next macro cycle. So going back to the student semester, that's probably the easiest one to think about. We have our prep cycle, right, during the beginning of the semester, our base cycle, which is about basic knowledge, build cycle, which is more about, okay, this is what we're kind of focusing on for this semester, peak, which is more about, okay, let's put together these projects or presentations, papers, goal week, which is about submitting or cram studying for that exam. Then you have transition. Transition is your winter break. It's your summer break. It's where you're able to take a step back and say, okay, that was a tough semester, and I take a step back, and then you get excited again once your next semester starts up, and you're like, ooh, I'm ready for this. I'm ready for the next semester. That's what a transition period is about. And that's what it's about for someone who has a semester, someone who's working, who has different projects, and someone who trains, an athlete who trains for specific races or specific competitions. They're able to take a step back and say, okay, what's my next one? What do I want to look forward to? So those are all the different mesocycles that are out there. In summary, cycles, we have macrocycles, which is bird's eye view, mesocycles, which break up macrocycles, and microcycles, which break down mesocycles into a training plan. Volume versus intensity, skills should be done separately to avoid injury. So developing both is not a good thing. You want to develop volume, then develop intensity, possibly switching back and forth, and that's okay, but not increasing both at the same time. Rest and recovery is a very important thing in order to be prepared for each cycle. So that's a recovery week as well as transition cycles. All right. We also talked about that in the last discussion on the concept of overload is all about rest and recovery for our bodies to replenish itself and get stronger. And then planning improves motivation. So as stated in previous discussions, planning and writing down goals improves success. And so this is a great way to be able to break everything down from your goal to your sub-goal to your tasks to understand how you're going to move through your plan from the beginning to the end and get to where you want to be from A to B. So sometimes we overshoot, sometimes we undershoot, and that's okay. But planning and writing things down improves success. So thank you for joining in today. We'll see you in the next discussion.